Okay, today we are going to talk about graphing sine and cosine and transformations on those graphs. Okay, you know from your unit circle. We have learned that this point here, 0, 1, this angle here is pi over 2. For graphing these, we're going to do them in radians. Pi, 3 pi over 2. And then here again, 2 pi or 0. And then we can keep going, coterminal angles, 5 pi over 2, 3 pi. Then 7 pi over 2 is the same as 3 pi over 2, etc., etc. And we have these points. And we know that the cosine is the x-coordinate and the sine is the y-coordinate. Oh, I just did those wrong. Zero, 1 there. 0, -1 here. And you've seen these among your 12 basic functions. 1, -1. We're going to actually number the x-axis in terms of pi here because x is my angle. And we can see the sine being my y-coordinate. I labeled that one wrong too. I was struggling with labeling these. That should be 1, 0, 0, 1. Okay, so the sine being the y-coordinate is 0 at an angle of 0. It is 1 at an angle of pi over 2, pi over 2 being my first dash. Is 0 again at pi. It is -1. And at 2 pi, it's back to 0. The pattern would continue. Negative pi over 2 is the same as 3 pi over 2. That's -1. Negative pi is the same as pi. That's 0. Negative 3 pi over 2 is the same as pi over 2, which is 1. And this, we know, these aren't quite straight. They make a wave. If we filled in more points, we'd see that more thoroughly. Okay, this is a wave. Cosine of x is going to look very similar. And the y-coordinates do go between 1 and -1. Yes, pi over 2 is a little more than 1, so I don't know if I scaled these perfectly evenly in length. But the cosine starts at 1, goes 0, -1, 0, back to 1. So it's the same graph, essentially, but it's got a horizontal shift on it. Okay, couple of important things. The period of a wave is one full wave. So it must get back to its starting point. Sometimes it's easiest to tell peak to peak. But these are both 2 pi. Well, sometimes easiest to tell peak to peak. So this. But if I'm going to do this, I have to go all the way to there. The amplitude goes from what we call the midline or the center line, or the technical term is the principal axis, which runs right down the middle. The amplitude is basically half of the height. It goes top to bottom. either one of these, they should be the same, is the amplitude. By default, it is 1. Okay. The horizontal shift is often called the phase shift. Okay. And so when we put these all into the transformation form, the transformation form is going to look like this. Now we're going to have sine or cosine. Now, the transformations work the same. We just start in a different spot. A sine B x minus C. Notice that I do have parentheses. The B is factored out. That's important. Plus D. Sometimes you can write, you'll see the D written in the front. Close this parenthesis. I shouldn't have D twice. But I should close the parentheses. A here is the amplitude. We've called it a vertical stretch before. B is about period, but period is not actually B. 2 pi over B is equal to period. B is like the horizontal stretch or compression. So we're going to actually see horizontal stretch as we're going to shrink our waves and we're going to expand our waves. Period is how far does one wave go? The default is 2 pi, that's why it's 2 pi over B. C is the horizontal shift or the phase shift. And we're going to use that term. I'll play a phase shift for you in class. I can't play it on this video, what it sounds like in audio, because it's copyrighted music. And then my video will get flagged. Horizontal shift is phase shift. That is what it's referred to in general. D is the midline or the center line. Okay, so you might want to write these down so you can reference them as we're making some graphs. So first one we're going to do, we're going to start with only a couple things. 2 sine x plus 3. Now here's what I always do when I'm making these graphs. First thing I do, I dash in the midline. My midline here is 3. We're going to do several without changing the period initially. I then know my amplitude is 2, which means I go up and down 2. I like to dash a top and a bottom line. And sine starts on the midline and goes up. Period wasn't changed. I don't have a B or a C, so I don't have to shift horizontally. I don't have to change my period. So I go up, and I go middle, down, middle. I've back to where I started going the direction I was at 2 pi. You always need to show at least one full period of the graph. It's nice to show more than one. On your worksheets, sometimes you might not like the scaling of the y-axis. Just cross out the labels and relabel them. If you want them to be by ones instead of by halves, cross out the labels, relabel them by ones. Okay, let's do this with the cosine. I'm going to put it on the same graph here. Now here I put the midline in the front. Midline's -1. Now I'm going up and down 3. 1, 2, 3. Guess these graphs will overlap a little bit. And I also have a shift. So I did my midline. Then I dealt with my amplitude. Now I'm going to deal with my horizontal shift. Eventually we'll add period and then deal with that before the horizontal shift means I'm here. And this is a cosine. Cosine starts in the up position. If you look at your basic graph of cosine, it starts up. So I just shifted this over like that. Pi over 2. So I went from here, shifted over pi over 2. Start up, down, middle, up. One of the easy things people often screw up is they'll go bottom to top without going to middle in there. It's very easy to do. I've done it. And again, this length here is 2 pi. Let's do a couple more. This one, my midline is right on the axis. I don't have anything changing my midline. But I am going up and down 4. And I must shift right pi. Shift to the right pi. I'm starting here. Now this is a negative sign. Sign normally goes up first. Because it's a negative, I'm going to go down first. And I go down, back to middle. I'll trace it now backwards. Actually, that would have been the same as a sign with no phase shift, a positive sign. But there's my graph. Sometimes I'll have a shift that is unnecessary. I could have not had the shift and not had the negative. There, because of these all are repeating, they all have a period. There's lots of different shifts I could have. Okay. I'll do another one here. So start with my midline of 3. Amplitude is still 2, even though it's negative. I still go up and down 2. The negative just affects the starting position. So now I'm shifting right pi over 2. So I'm shifting right pi over 2, and the negative reflects over that midline, so it starts down. So negative cosine starts down instead of up, goes middle, up, middle, trace it backwards. Notice that this looks like starting from 0, 0, or starting from 3, 0, I guess. All of these cosines could be written as sines, or sines could be written as cosines by just adjusting a phase shift on them. Okay, So this would get you ready for sine and cosine 2, where there is no change of period. Sine and cosine 3, we're going to start changing the period. No, I'm not going to do 3 to you. 3 is hard. We'll just do 2x to start with. So again, as I've been doing, I'm going to start by putting on my midline. At -4. My amplitude is going up and down too. I have no shift. However, my period, this time I have a b that's 2 here. That's my b. So period is 2 pi over 2, or pi. That means I need to finish by pi. And if you'll notice all of these, my period 2 pi, I had 1, 2, 3 between my endpoints of my wave, my full wave. So right now I've got 1 dash in between, so I'm going to split these in half. I start it. Now I'm going to go this dash, pi over 2, down. Now I've finished my wave at pi. I'll split these again. I've done this enough that I don't have to put the ones back here, but I would recommend it. Would recommend splitting these. And I usually just make them a little shorter, split them, put them in there so that I've got my points. What I'm looking for is not perfect waves, but I'm looking for these points. You can exaggerate your points a little bit, but it's easy to tell that you know where you're doing them. Another one. Okay. So start with my center line at 3. Go up and down 2. Now my period. Period is pi over b. B is 1/2 this time. Dividing by 1/2 is the same as multiplying by 2. So this is now 4 pi. I'm going to need to make this graph longer. Okay. I also have a shift right pi over 2. This is a negative cosine, so I'm starting on the bottom line. Because I'm going all the way out here is where I'm going to end, I'm only going half as far. Some of these are a little off. I'm going to erase some of my dashes. So I'm actually having to skip. Oops, I can't go to top. I just missed going center. I went to top. That's an easy mistake to make, even for a teacher. So yes, because the period is so far out, I am going every other one, and I didn't have my scale very well. But this is important. One last example of this. Notice that my x minus pi is not factored out. In order to fix this, I must factor it out. To factor out a 2 from pi, I just divide the pi by 2. So now my period 2 pi over 2 is pi. And my shift is pi over 2. It is not a full pi. I'm just going to go there. Midline is 1. Top and bottom are up and down 2 because the amplitude is 2. Start at pi over 2. Cosine starts up. I need to finish 1 pi later. That's 3 pi over 2, which means I need these subdivisions. Also important with these, don't accidentally go on the axis. I've done that before too. I plot them on the axis instead of the center line or the bottom line. And there is my graph.